So many people get the book called Revelation, the final book of the Christian Bible, completely wrong. This confusing ancient document has produced endless studies, but almost none of these bothers to care for what this document and its strange details actually meant for its first century author and his intended audience. A brief survey of published opinions as to the supposed genre of literature Revelation belongs to demonstrates the apathy modern people have toward the first century author and his intended audience. Western historians, relying heavily on disciplined intuition, really a sophisticated Northern European and North American ethnocentrism, provide many wrong ideas. Their answers reflect literature familiar in their contemporary university departments, rather than the ancient world. And so, informed in that way, these scholars will say Revelation is symbolic fiction. Or perhaps Revelation is a midrashic hodgepodge of phrases and sentences culled from the Hebrew Scriptures. Or perhaps Revelation is an apocalypse. Or is an eschatological work. Or is an example of apocalyptic eschatology. Are any of these options helpful? Only if the author of Revelation and his original readers were 21st century Northern Europeans or North Americans. In that case, then these scholars might just be onto something. Some people commenting on Revelation give a non-scholarly or fundamentalist interpretations of the book of Revelation. Unfortunately, these are the most popular commentaries, full of allegory gone wild. Some of these claim to be historical, explaining that Babylon stands for Rome, which they see as the persecutor of the author's oppressed churches. Others want to make the book of Revelation all about the liturgy, all about the Holy Mass. Others claim Revelation to be a work that foretells the future. These people say that the author of the book of Revelation was writing directly and precisely to us, for 21st century believers. The book is presented by these fundamentalists as a kind of code waiting to be cracked, filled with veiled but totally obvious references to Russia, the United States, the oil-rich Middle East, and even to modern Israel. All these attempts, whether scholarly or non-scholarly, have something in common. They are all completely wrong. There are really two extremes when it comes to modern commentators on the book of Revelation. At one end of the spectrum are historically minded interpreters of the book. These are scholars who always seek a range of historical contexts which might provide the information necessary to interpret this book in terms of its author and original audience in the first century Mediterranean. At the other extreme, we find relevance-seeking Bible readers, many of them non-scholarly, who have looked for contemporary social signs of the times that might be made to fit the scenes in the book of Revelation and thus demonstrate what is soon to happen in our own historical period. My friends, these YouTube presentations on Revelation avoids these two extremes by following the context group of biblical scholars, Bruce Molina and John Pilch. If we had to situate these two men between the historically minded interpreters and the other extreme of the relevance-seeking Bible readers, Molina and Pilch would be closer to the former. And yet, academia has failed its own historical project when it comes to the book called Apocalypse or Revelation. Why? Because almost all historically oriented commentaries on the book of Revelation completely omit the sky dimension of life it showcases in favor for their own anachronistic concerns. This is an astonishing omission, given the fact that the sky formed an integral part of the social environment of the first century Mediterranean world. Classicist Ramsay MacMullen observed nearly half a century ago, quote, "From the period of the Roman Empire alone, the surviving astrological corpus matches in bulk the entire historical corpus. And though examined in detail by students of ancient religion, language, and science, it has been quite neglected by the social historian." End quote. Together with this terrible neglect of historians, the sky dimension has also been inexcusably neglected by biblical interpreters as well. The Greco-Roman period has left us a plethora of documents astronomical and astrological. There was no distinction between the two in antiquity. Reading these ancient Greco-Roman documents makes it quite obvious that for the contemporaries of Jesus, Paul, and the author of Revelation, sky and land constituted a single environmental unit, a single social arena. Following context group scholars Bruce Molina and John Pilch, the whole work called Revelation concerns the author's visions of events in the sky. Molina and Pilch take the author of Revelation at his word. If John said he went up into the sky, well, they believe that, at least in his estimation, John went into the sky. According to these scholars, the author was not writing pious polemic fiction in some 21st century American university office. The questions then are these. How did people in antiquity go into the sky? What did they expect to see in the sky? How did they learn to read the sky? What was the social function of sky reading? These and more fascinating questions we will be exploring in our ongoing study of Revelation.